you, and thank you for inviting me to address you this evening on the topic of fraud. Let's get going. Right, so let's get the old slides moving along. Right, so just so you know where I'm from, I work for the Southwest Regional Organised Crime Unit. For those who don't know what that is, which is pretty much everyone, the ROCU, as we call it, is an umbrella government law enforcement agency which supports the regional police forces. So Avon and Somerset is the force which covers Chard, obviously, my old police force, and we are made up basically of officers from those 5 police forces in the region, and we provide services to those police forces that they don't have the ability to do themselves. Stuff around counterterrorism, surveillance, and economic crime. And I work in the economic crime department as the Regional Fraud Protect Advisor for the Southwest. So I'm not a police officer. I used to be. I retired in December. Now I work for the police as a civil servant in this capacity. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about 3 aspects of fraud, or I'm going to give you the presentation in 3 facets. The first bit, I'm going to talk about the impact of fraud, because it's important we know how damaging it is. Then I'm going to talk about the frauds themselves. And finally, I'm going to give you my golden tips, which will help you stay safe from frauds as you go forwards. So let's talk about fraud. Fraud is not an exciting or a sexy crime to investigate. Inspector Morse never detected any frauds in his long career on the telly. He restricted himself to homicides. And as a result of that, fraud gets a very low profile when it comes to public awareness. However, its effects are devastating. As you can see, in the last financial year, the cost of fraud to the UK economy was around about £190 billion, a vast amount of money. And that actually drops out of around 4.5 million individual reports of fraud, which were made in England and Wales alone, not Scotland, not Ireland, in 2020. So a vast amount of money being drained out of the country's economy every year. Now that 190 billion is all fraud. It includes fraud against the government, fraud against the commercial and the private sector as well. So it's pretty much all encompassing. But the real number, which we should be interested in, because we're ordinary citizens, is 7 billion, because 7 billion is what's lost to private individuals such as you and I in any given year. So it's a big amount of money to lose. 7 billion, 7,000 million, to use the other way that you describe a billion. If you want to know what you could spend that on, if you were a country looking to spend that money wisely, £7 billion would pay for 17,500 heart transplant operations, because a heart transplant costs the NHS about 40,000 each. So a lot of money being lost every year just to fraud that could be spent, I think you'll agree, in far better directions. Now, if we were to look at all crime that's reported nationally over the pace of a year, and I'm talking all crimes, everything from murders to assaults to burglaries, thefts, drug offences, fraud on its own.
An assault is the act of inflicting physical harm. Would you like?
My Alexa heard me saying something then. Fraud would make up for 34% of all crime. So as you can see, huge amount. And it largely flies under the radar because nobody gets hurt, and it's not one of those crimes which makes the news very often. And it's a growing crime because criminals, they don't rob banks anymore. I can tell you now, they don't like robbing banks because they tend to get caught. There's CCTV cameras everywhere, they leave forensic evidence, and the police are really effective at catching criminals who commit physical crimes. But because much of fraud is remotely perpetuated, it's harder to detect. So this is why it's a growing crime type. If you want to know what your risks are of becoming a victim of fraud, well, you're 14 times more likely to be the victim of a fraud than a burglary. And you're 55 times more likely to be the victim of a fraud than a robbery. It says a lot about the safety of our country anyway, but you have to remember as well, the big thing with fraud is it's indiscriminate. Now, if you lived in the middle of central London or Liverpool or Manchester, you would be right in thinking that your chances of being the victim of a robbery would be higher than if you lived in Chard, because there's a lot more people living in these big city centres. Your likelihood of falling victim to crime would be higher. But when it comes to fraud, it has no boundaries. It attacks everybody equally. It doesn't care where we live. It attacks us through our mass communication devices, most commonly telephone, internet. So we're all at the same risk, regardless of where we live. One of the issues for law enforcement around fraud is the fact that it's a hidden crime. And what I mean by that is that it tends to happen, as I say, over the phone, over the internet, intimately. So it tends to be between the victim and the offender and nobody else, normally over the phone, often via email or whatever. And as a result of that, a lot of the victims don't report it. They are embarrassed. They are ashamed. They're afraid of repercussions. They don't want to get sucked into the criminal justice system. They just don't report it. And if it goes unreported, law enforcement can't do anything about it. We can't protect the victim from it happening again, because we know if you're the victim of a fraud once, you're likely to be a repeat victim because they keep coming back and targeting you over and over again. And the other thing is, we can't catch the offenders. If you don't tell us about it, there's no chance of catching the offenders, so they continue to commit offences. So hidden crime, difficult for us. And as a result of that under-reporting by people, we guess, because we don't know, but our best guess is only 15% of fraud ever comes to the attention of the authorities, which means 85% of the victims go unprotected. So it's really important for people to report it if they are victimized by fraud. So big issue for law enforcement. But there is good news here, and that is that as much as 80% of fraud is preventable, provided we take appropriate steps to protect ourselves. And I'll talk about that as we go along. Now, just so as we're clear, when I talk about fraud, you'll also hear it described as scams, very commonly called scams, deception, swindles, whatever they're called. Fraud is just theft by lying. That is all that it is. Somebody telling you an untruth in order to steal your money. That's fraud, simple as that. Now, one of the ingredients used in fraud is often social engineering. And in its simplest terms, social engineering is the clever manipulation of the natural human tendency to be trusting. Because most of us go through lives, and if somebody tells us something, we believe it to be true. Because most people tell truth to each other. And this becomes part of our natural culture. We believe people when they tell us something. And social engineering has been used in marketing for many years, selling us things. You know, they tell us that something is correct. You know, if you, a few years ago, you'd have thought that eating a Mars bar was a healthy option because we were told helps you work, rest and play. But actually we know that Mars bars are not a healthy option. It was social engineering. Social engineering, when it comes to fraud, often takes the part of people telling you that they're from authority positions. They'll tell you they're police officers, work for the local authority, work for the utility company to get you to believe something that they're telling. They'll also use a number of separate interactions with you. It's not just one phone call. They might ring you 3 times over the course of a week, and they will give you a little bit of that fraud each time to build up this impression in your mind that it's correct. It's very complex. That's why they make billions of pounds out of fraud. So it's not a simple thing anymore. It's quite difficult to spot. That's social engineering. One of the other angles they use is our natural tendencies not to say no to people and put the phone down, because we're a very courteous race of people, us British, particularly those of us of later life, because we were brought up to show respect to authority figures. So if somebody rings us up and tells us they're a police officer, we find it very difficult to be rude to them, put the phone down, say no, discontinue the call. And this is how fraudsters would prey upon our natural tendencies to feel deferential to people in authority. You know, doctors, police officers, people who work for the council, authority figures. I can only say at this point, when my early advice to you is that I fully advocate putting the phone down if somebody rings you and you don't like the direction the conversation is going. Say no, put the phone down. If they've rung you, they've intruded upon your privacy, you're quite entitled. You don't have to feel it's discourteous. Put that phone down. Another thing I want to quickly get out there is that don't forget, fraud is not just about money. They're after your personal details. As much as they want to steal your money, they want to steal your information. They'll be asking for your bank account details, your personal details, and we'll talk about how they do that in a moment. Now I'm going to talk about the frauds which you will encounter as you go through life. and you'll be able to spot them, hopefully then, if they cross your path. So one of the most common types of fraud is called advance fee fraud. And this is quite simply a trap, baited most often with free money, could be goods or services as well. What do I mean? Well, it's this sort of thing. You get a phone call out of the blue, and it'll be somebody who tells you that you've won the lottery or a prize. Not quite that simple. Sometimes they'll tell you that you've gone onto a website and you may have left your email address to receive a newsletter, perhaps. And they will tell you that your email address has been entered into a competition, and lo and behold, you've gone and won. And you've won £10,000. But in order to get your 10,000, you have to pay £200 as an admin fee, which is refundable when you get your money. Or, and this is important, they may say to you, we just need your bank account details so we can transfer those winnings into your account. And of course, what this does, it locks you into this sense of, I'm so happy, I've won the big 10,000. You overlook these little obstacles, which are actually the frauds. You know, if you pay that £200 admin fee, that's the last you hear of it. They'll be off with your money. If you give your bank account details, it won't be used to transfer money into your account. It will be used by these highly intelligent, highly technically capable criminals to gain access to your funds in some nefarious way. So be very careful if somebody tells you you've won a competition that you don't remember entering or anything like that. Inheritance fraud works very similarly. This is where you'll be contacted by a solicitor or a lawyer's agent who will tell you that a long lost relative has died and you're next in line for the legacy. You're the last living relative in the family line and you're due to receive £100,000. They can make any number up, can't they? But they will tell you that there is a finder's fee of 5%, which you have to pay up front before you get the big number. And that could be £5,000, £2,000, whatever. Again, exactly, it's just an advance fee fraud. Same thing, big number in the distance, you have to pay something or give something over to receive that smaller number. It might just be they tell you that they want to transfer the money into your account, your legacy, and in order to do so, they need your bank account details. So very simple, very effective frauds, very successful as well. I put the gambling tips in there just to remind us that it's not necessarily just money. They may offer you something like preferential information. So if you're a horse racing enthusiast, they'll tell you that you can have access to this privileged information, but you have to pay a fee up front to get it. And of course, if you paid, that's the last you'd hear of it. So it's quite simply a scam. Software service fraud, another type of fraud, really simple though in many respects and very common. You get a phone call alluding to be from Microsoft or Apple, and they'll tell you that they've conducted a virus scan of your computer remotely from their head office in California or whatever, and they've detected that your computer has a virus on it, and they are able to sort that out for you. But what they need you to do is to download a remote access device so that they can access your computer. Got to click on something, it'll download, and they can get in there and sort that virus out. Of course, what they really want you to do is to let them into your computer, but they'll get into that hard drive and they'll harvest your information, because at some point, of course, you'd have bought something from Amazon, paid for something using eBay or PayPal, or your weekly shopping at the supermarket, and your financial information is in there somewhere, and they'll get that out. And of course, again, they're going to use it for nefarious purposes. I can tell you that none of the big software companies provide this as a service. So if you get a call saying it's from Microsoft, Apple, it's a fraud, because they don't offer that service. Courier fraud, slightly different type, but uses social engineering at its very heart. So this will be the phone call you get, and it'll be a police officer or somebody from the Serious Fraud Office, the National Crime Agency, some other important government agency, FBI, whatever, and they'll tell you that they're investigating a financial crime at your bank, your branch, and they suspect one of the staff there is laundering money. So in order to entrap that person, they have placed a load of marked banknotes into the currency which goes into that bank. And what they would like you to do is to go along there and help with their investigation. Now, this might take the form of several phone calls over a number of days when you're speaking to many very articulate, professional and well-spoken people who will use any number of methods to make you believe that they are who they say they are. And then they'll ask you to go to your bank, draw out the money, bring it home, package it up, and they'll send a special courier to collect that money, and they'll take it directly to the forensic science lab where they'll test it. They'll find then that it's the marked notes that they've entered into the system, and it will allow them to detect the offender. Of course, it's not true. It's a scam. The police will never ask you to draw your money out from any financial institution, move it around, give it to somebody. It's just a load of nonsense. It's a fraud, and it's using social engineering. Do you think it sounds implausible? About 5 years ago, I was the neighbourhood sergeant in Burnham-on-Sea. You'll, of course, know where that is in Somerset. And a gentleman came into the station one day, and in his car, he had £20,000 in cash. He'd received that phone call. He'd been taken in by the scam. He'd gone to the bank. He'd drawn out his savings, and he was on his way home to await that courier coming to his house. But luckily, he lived in between, so the police station was in between where he lived and the bank. So he decided to pop in and just have a chat to make sure everything was pucker. And of course, we took him straight back to the bank, put his money away safe, went home to see who turned up. Just a local taxi driver who'd been paid to go and collect a parcel and take it to a third party in a lay-by. Totally incited to the crime that was taking place. When we got to the lay-by, of course, the other people had done a runner because it had taken longer than expected, so they run off. But these courier frauds happen. They may be slightly different in the manner in which they're delivered from the way I've just told that one, but they all take the same form. Be careful. If you get a phone call alleging to be from the police or a government agency, and they ask you to do something with your money, it's probably a fraud, because we just don't do that. Slightly different, but not involving the human element, same sort of thing, safe account fraud. You might get a phone call, same thing, police officers, number of different phone calls perhaps, telling you that your building society or your bank account is under threat from people who are trying to infiltrate it and steal your money. And they'll tell you to move your money to a safe account, a special government-provided safe account where you can move your money to, and it'll be protected against any attacks by actors who are trying to steal your money. And of course, if you were to move your money to that account, they have control of that account, the money would disappear. So my advice, if you receive any phone calls from people alluding to be from the police, asking you to move money, probably a fraud, have nothing to do with it. Talking about financial institutions, what you see on your screen now is a fraudulent email, a real one, classic one. As you can see, this one looks like it's from the Barclays Bank, but it could just as easily say HSBC. It could say your bank. So think of that. And in this case, they're telling us there's been a software upgrade and they need us to confirm our bank details. And they want us to click on that blue hyperlink, which will take us to another page where they'll try and harvest our information. Again, it's a fraud. Banks will never, ever ask you to divulge your personal details, your bank details, via an unsolicited email, which just drops into your email inbox. If you do online banking, you'll be familiar, if you use a phone or whatever, with the safety protocols that they have in place to check you are who they say you are. Fingerprint, facial recognition, phone backs, all these sort of things. Never will you get an unsolicited email that you're not expecting, drop in, ask you to divulge privileged information. If you do, it's a scam, and you can delete it quite comfortably. Very similar is the HMRC fraud. This is a genuine one. Again, looks like it's from HMRC, but it isn't. This dropped into somebody's email account, and it told them that they'd been selected for a rebate, and all they need to do is to click that refund button, which takes you to this page. Again, reiterates the information we just had, but they're asking for information. This is what they're here. They're mining us for information. Starts off simple stuff, normal name, address, stuff like that. Then it gets sinister, mother's maiden name, bank account, and as you can see, it finishes up with card security code. These are all the most important bits of information you should be protecting and keeping safe. I describe this information really as the keys to the safe in which your money is kept in the bank. Now, it's an electronic safe these days because this information can be used to gain access to it, or it can be used to open another bank account, make payments, internationally, the way that these criminals are acting these days with the financial know-how and the technical awareness they have, it's beyond anybody's belief. You really have to keep this information close to your chest as if it is money itself. Think of it as the keys to the safe to your money. Protect it in the same way that you would. Because if you get a call like that or an email like that, alluding to be from HMRC, it's a scam. Because HMRC don't conduct any of their business via email. They do it via land mail. You'll get it through the letterbox. I had a phone call the other day, 2 phone calls in the same day, which were allegedly from HMRC, and they told me that they were outside the courts, I hadn't paid my correct tax, and they were about to issue an arrest warrant unless I made good on my overdue tax right there, right now. And it was just trying to get me to pay money to them. And an absolute scam, a classic. HMRC, don't do that. You get that call, it's a fraud. I've dropped an investment fraud here very quickly because it's gone up 20% in the last 12 months because people are shifting their money around during the pandemic because the interest rates have gone down and they're trying to look for the best returns from their investments. Criminals know this, and they have started setting up fake websites that look like real investment websites. So if you're looking around online and you're thinking about investing your money, be very, very careful, because criminals today can spoof websites. They can spoof telephone numbers and email addresses. Spoofing, replicating, cloning, whatever you want to call it. They just make a replica, a facsimile of a genuine website. You might go on there thinking it's really HSBC or whatever. You might invest your money electronically and they will steal that money and disappear the next day. And you know no different. You won't know that you are on a replica website. So you need to be very careful if you're thinking about investing funds. For me, if I was looking to invest funds, I would want to be walking into a physical property where the person I speak to, I know is an accredited, licensed financial advisor. That's all I'll say about that. Now, romance fraud has had a massive surge during lockdown. I guess we should have expected it because people lonely, isolated at home, looking for companionship online. And they've joined dating sites, companion sites, befriending sites, shared interest sites. It might be book clubs, might be carpentry clubs, whatever. And romance fraud is just a term that we use. It's not necessarily all romance, but it's just companionship, where you're speaking to other people using the internet as a mechanism. How do they work? Well, typically, you build this relationship, you go online, you meet somebody new. Could be, as I say, any reason for meeting them, and you build a friendship. And very quickly, the friendship will become very strong, very fast. If it was a dating one, for instance, in the second meeting, they'd be telling you that they love you and you're the love of their life and they want to spend the rest of their life with you. And then they'll hit you with, can I borrow some money? Can I use your bank account to pay a check into and you give me the money? Can you take out a bank loan and I pay you back because I can't get a bank loan? Or any number of reasons why they need the money and you to facilitate it. And of course, these are cruel, awful frauds, which they use people's loneliness and isolation as a weapon to try and steal your money. As you can see, the tagline is "Don't let your heart rule your head," but equally it can just be, friendship, which is being built online. My advice: friends don't ask friends to borrow money when they've just met. Quite often they don't ask to borrow when they've known each other for 25 years. So just be very minded if you enter into any relationships of that nature online and suddenly people take that turn. I checked my intelligence just before I came to see you, and the weekly statistics tell me that the most common fraud in the UK this week has been the national insurance number fraud. This is where you get a phone call and it'll be somebody telling you that your national insurance number has been used, or has been compromised, and people are trying to use it to get bank loans, things like that. And then they'll ask you for information so that they can confirm your identity and sort the issues out. I can tell you that your national insurance number is a passive number. It can't be used for anything. It doesn't do anything. So if somebody tells you that it's being used to compromise something else, it's a lie, it's a fraud. Again, they're just trying to steal your information. The second most common fraud in the UK this week is the Royal Mail parcel delivery fraud. This might take the form of a text or an email, and it'll tell you that you've missed a parcel delivery by the Royal Mail, and they want you to make a payment to secure a new delivery. Again, they may simply be after your details. They might simply be after £2.99, because remember, they're sending this out to millions of people. And if a small handful respond, they've made a fortune. So Royal Mail don't charge for redeliveries. So if you get such contact, it's a fraud. A quick reminder, I've mostly talked about things which happen over the phone and over the internet, but they also come through your letterbox. Don't let a stamp on something make you think that it's genuine. And it's exactly the same. There's one there that says £10,000. If you were to look on the back of that letter telling you that you've won that money, it'll simply say, ring this number to claim your money. When you ring the number, they'll tell you you have to pay a £200 admin fee, or they want your details so that they can transfer the money to your account. Either way, pure and simple, it's a fraud. It's just coming through the letterbox instead of phone or the internet. So, what are my golden rules to stay safe from fraud? Well, the first one is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Now, if I came into your dining room tonight and told you that I'd created this marvelous cake, tasted great, you can eat as much of it as you like, and you will not gain an ounce of weight. In fact, you'll lose weight. You'll get that rippling torso there, which I posed for 25 years ago, not. And you wouldn't believe it, because in your mind, you know you can't eat cake and get a physique like that. And your instinct would tell you, that's wrong. I'm not going to fall for that. But you know what? Many victims of fraud, and I meet many victims of fraud, tragically, will tell me that when the early days, when they were starting off in the fraud which they were caught up in, something inside them told them this was dodgy. But they still went ahead with it because they didn't want to say no. They felt compelled, or they liked that big 10,000 number that they saw in the distance. I just say to you this: if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And part company with that thing immediately. Another ingredient in many frauds is the pressure of time, where people will lay time pressure on you to get you to make a mistake. Now, this often was used in selling things like double glazing, wasn't it? If you buy it today, it's 50% cheaper than it is tomorrow. And frauds do the same thing. Remember I talked earlier about that HMRC fraud that they tried to get me in? They're going to issue a warrant for my arrest unless I pay what I owe today. But only today, you have to pay it now. That's just a fraud using a time pressure. If you find yourself in a financial situation where somebody's applying pressure of time to you, probably a fraud. We never pay for large things with money anymore, do we? So if somebody comes to your life and tells you, I'm going to fit this new roof to your house, repair your car, build a wall in your garden, do whatever they want to do for you, and they tell you that they will only accept cash money, it's a good sign there's something dodgy there. Because if you pay cash, that money is not traceable. You can't get it back if it disappears, if they don't build the wall in your garden or fix the roof. We can't find that money again. It's gone. It's dispersed to the four corners of the world. So don't pay for big items using cash money. You know, I'm not talking about the window cleaner here. I'm talking about large sums of money. So be very careful if somebody says they'll only work for you and they'll only accept cash. In the same way that if somebody says that they want you to pay for something by going to the post office and wiring money to a Western Union account. Now that's really strange. That shouldn't happen. It never happens to people. So if somebody says to you, yes, fine, I'm going to sell you my second-hand car, whatever, but I need you to go to the post office and wire it to my account using Western Union. Very, very dodgy indeed. Especially dodgy if they ask you to do it in something like a foreign currency, dollars, whatever, dinars, or whatever foreign currency they suggest. If it's outside of the ordinary, there's normally something suspicious about it. So your instinct will tell you when that is. But if they're asking you to wire money, or they're asking you to spend funny money, dollars or whatever, it's a good sign it's a scam. And I've probably already said it once, but I want to reiterate it. We never divulge our personal information, our financial information to people we're not 100% certain of their identity and why they want our money. So we just don't read it out over the phone to strangers. We want to make sure they are genuine. We want to know who they are. Now, I just want to clear this up because a lot of people say, well, I buy things over the phone. Should I not give my details? Well, I'll give you a scenario. Imagine you want to buy a ton of sand from the builder's merchant. You get the yellow pages, you look at the number, you see the builder's merchant, you ring that number on your own phone, it rings, somebody answers the phone, says they're a builder's merchant. We say, I want a ton of sand, and we pay using our credit card. We give our details to them. We're happy to give our details here because we found that number out. We know who they are because we've rung them. We know, because they've answered the phone. We know that's expected. The people we expect to answer the phone have answered it. We're feeling quite comfortable here giving our card. Imagine, though, the following day, the phone rings out of the blue and somebody says, hello, something went wrong with that payment you made yesterday. Can you just read your card number out to me again, please? Now, we don't know who's on the phone now because that's an unsolicited call. That phone call has just come through to us, could be anywhere in the world, could be anybody, and they're asking for our details. We don't give them our details because we're not in charge of that call. Now, if we wanted to, turn that call into a safe call, all we do is say, okay, no worries, I'm going to ring you back so I can check who you are. They put the phone down. You wait a little while because, if they haven't disconnected, you might be picking up the phone to them again, or you use a different telephone, use your mobile phone. You get that number you originally used to ring the builder's merchant. You ring it again. You're speaking to the builder's merchant. You've turned an insecure call into a call you feel safe about. That's the difference there. Just wanted to clarify that. Don't forget, if you're in a situation where somebody's asking you to spend money or pay for something that you feel uncomfortable with, ask somebody else for another opinion. Ask a friend, relative, neighbor, ask a fellow Rotarian or somebody who you feel you can trust to give you some sound advice. Because often when you're in the middle of the storm, you lose the perspective. It's the eye of the tornado, isn't it? It's calm, but everything else is in turmoil. Asking somebody who's not involved, they'll have a different perspective. It might help get to the situation that you want. And always try and buy time to make some thinking. So if somebody's putting pressure on you to pay for something or give your details, tell them, ring back tomorrow, sleep on it, or ring back in an hour because I need to go to the doctor, I need to let the dog out, whatever it may be, or at the very least, make a cup of tea. Because making a cup of tea, putting the kettle on, brewing it, sitting down, drinking it, 10, 15 minutes, gives you time to get your ducks in order in the brain, and then you can make a better decision, an informed decision, because we make errors of judgment when we're placed under pressure of time. So it's a feature of being a human being. So buy time to think about it. And finally, never be afraid to report it if you've fallen victim to a fraudulent situation. Now, a lot of people, as I said, 85% of them don't report it. If you've given your number over or paid somebody that you think you shouldn't have after you put the phone down, your first call should be to your bank or building society because they can put a stop on the transaction or get the money back from its destination. Your second call should be to Action Fraud, the National British Fraud Reporting Line. This is run and organised by the police. They will take the information. They will send it to your local police force to investigate. But your first call, the bank, because they can stop the money going somewhere. And finally, I want to leave you with a thought in your mind, which hopefully will stick there and help you going forwards. I want you to think, and trust me on this, stick with me. I want you to imagine that you are a gazelle on the plains of Africa, and you're a new gazelle, first year in the job, and you've never seen one of these fellas before. But something inside you tells you that you should run away from it and not running towards it. And that something inside you is instinct. We've talked about it already tonight. And as I've said, I've met many, many victims of fraud who will say that when I first got caught up in this fraud situation, I kind of knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to say no. I didn't want to put the phone down on this person who was telling me he was an inspector in the police and they want me to help them or other people are going to lose money. Or, I wanted that legacy that my long lost cousin had left, or that £10,000, which I thought I was going to win. It's the old greed goggles are on, aren't they? And I thought, oh, you know, although it sounds wrong, I'm going to go along with it. And then you go along with it and you go along with it a bit further. And before you know it, you're at the butt end of financial devastation. I would say to you, if you feel that instinct telling you something's not right, something like, why have I had this call today? I don't remember entering that lottery. I've never heard of that cousin who's died. All of these things, they're little, voices in the back of your head saying, it's not right. Get out of this. It's not right. I would say to you, don't counteract your instinct. Run away. Be the gazelle, right? Follow your gazelle instinct. Run away. Don't become the leopard's lunch. Don't fall victim to the fraud. Now, I apologize for the anticlimax. We used to have a leopard roaring there, but tragically, after the death of several members of the WI, we had to downgrade it to a household cat. So, the effects aren't quite so good. But don't forget, ring your bank, then ring Action Fraud if you find yourself at the end of a fraud. So there we go, gentlemen. That is the fraud safety lecture for tonight. I'm happy to take any questions you may have, or perhaps one of you gentlemen has narrowly avoided a fraud and you want to tell us about the learning experience that you've had.
Well, the first thing I would say, Ashley, is, I had your email asking whether we would like this talk, and obviously I've never met you, never heard of you. So I must admit, I did refer the matter to the local police station to get them to check that the email address that you've given was a valid email address. It's as simple as that a lot of the time. Gentlemen, you will need to unmute yourselves if you wish to ask a question. Now, you know you can do this by just pressing the little microphone to the bottom right hand. Alternatively, you can temporarily unmute yourself by just pressing and holding the space bar. So does anybody have any questions?
Yes, can I ask Ashley, is cold calling on the telephone illegal?
By cold calling, what do you mean? Commercial ventures who will ring you, or that sort of thing?
Yes. My wife has had several calls over the last couple of weeks about people wanting to do roof installations, wanting to do driveway inspections, that sort of thing.
Right. That sort of thing is legal. Now, there is a way you can get around that. You might have heard of the telephone preference service. This is a service which you can sign up to. Just type telephone preference service into Google, it'll come up. Alternatively, actually, I am going to be sending the organizer for this meeting today a booklet, a follow-up booklet called The Little Book of Big Scams. And inside that is a lot more advice about fraud, information about how to contact Action Fraud, and information about the telephone preference service as well. It's an electronic book, and then they can send it on to everybody who's here tonight. You can keep it then on your desktop and refer to it when you need it.
Yeah. So what kind of cold calling would be illegal?
Right. Now, the telephone preference service, well, if you sign up to it, it'll cut out those legal commercial calls that you're getting. You're probably on somebody's mailing list or phone list, and you're going to continue to get those calls until you break that cycle. If you sign up to the telephone preference service, it means that they will not telephone you for commercial purposes. It does not mean, though, that you won't get contacted by fraudulent criminals, because obviously they don't abide by the law. So you can reduce your calls by signing up to the telephone preference service. You can't prevent illegal calls. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Ashley.
Dave, you've got a question.
Yeah, Ashley. Yeah. Do the police actually catch some of these fraudsters and scammers in this country in particular? And obviously, I appreciate it's global. I just wonder what percentage, if they do. Thank you.
The percentage is very low. The percentage is very low. As you see, that there are millions of frauds that we know of. That 4.4 million is actually only the stuff we know of. And when you consider 85% of people don't report fraud, you can only goggle at the numbers that we're really talking about. So as a result of that, it will be impossible for us to accurately investigate many of these frauds, particularly as many of them originate outside of the UK. So they're outside of our borders. We can't bring the people to justice. those that, we got a substantial team actually in the economic crime unit, which do track down the larger frauds, as you can imagine, that originate in the UK. So it's a very small number which get brought to justice. The way that we approach this is we believe we're not going to detect our way out of fraud. We're going to educate our way out of it. So tonight, by me speaking to you, bringing you up to speed with many of the frauds you're likely to encounter, this is a far better way of us investing effort than actually trying to catch people who are in Thailand or sub-Saharan Africa, because we'll never bring them to justice. So that's probably the best way that we approach it today.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said earlier on. I got scammed last year and lost £300 on a deal. But 7 weeks ago, I got an email from Microsoft saying that there was a fault with my system and I needed to upgrade my system, which would cost me £80. And I contacted my computer provider, which all the Rotarians know as David up in Coombe. And he said, no, this is a scam. And fortunately, I didn't lose that.
Excellent. I'm so pleased because, that's one of the routes. We talked about that one tonight. Very common one they use. And of course, they're sending these out in millions. And you can imagine, especially this year, a lot of people who are unfamiliar with technology have gone onto the internet this year because of the pandemic. My parents, my dad is 89, my mum's in her 80s. This year, they've been forced to use the internet more than they've ever done before. Uncomfortable zones of operation for them. And if you get an email like that and you're not very familiar with technology, you can imagine it's so easy to get sucked in.
Yeah, unfortunately, they had invaded my system, and I had to, in the end, have a new hard drive fitted and have it totally cleaned up.
Yeah,
it cost me money.
Tragic, but at least you saved yourself financial loss.
Well, I didn't give those buggers it.
Good.
Anybody else got a question? Yes, Barry.
Can I just...
Barry.
Is that me? Yeah. Hello. Thanks, Ash, for your talk. It's brilliant. I had a telephone call today regarding my national insurance number, as you said, but the number wasn't withheld. Do I give that number to anybody?
I wouldn't bother, to be honest. I mean, one of the things you can do is if you get a number like that, or somebody tries you with a scam, if you go onto Action Fraud's website, there's an electronic form there. You don't have to ring up and wait in a list to speak to anybody. You can fill in a form, put the number that you've recorded that somebody's tried to scam you with. And one of Action Fraud's biggest jobs is they block these incoming calls. So many of them originate outside the UK. They block all of these calls once they're reported. So it's a constant game of cat and mouse. Once we stop one, they'll create another one, but it protects somebody if we do that. So it's up to your consideration. If you get loads of these, it's going to take you all day to do it. If you get an occasional call, might be worth you reporting it.
Okay, thank you. Stanley.
I'm just going to say that twice in the last fortnight, I've had the Royal Mail request for non-delivery of parcels, and my reaction is put it in writing and put the phone down.
Excellent. Yeah, superb. You spotted it. You went with your gazelle instinct.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Steve? You need to unmute yourself, Steve.
Actually, one of the ones that's doing the rounds at the moment, because I've had it for the last 2 months, is pertaining to come from TV licensing. Say, we've been unable to take your payment. Please log on and make a payment. And the crazy thing is, they've even got the wrong TV license reference number for me. So it was a no-brainer. No way was it genuine.
No, they unfortunately, they're very canny and they evolve constantly. So where things, naturally change. So, something will come up. There'll be some sort of COVID recovery fund that people can apply for. Whatever something new happens, the next day we get frauds around that. So they're very, very current in the way that they approach these things. You don't get to take 190 billion pounds a year off people without being really good at your job. And we just have to be that little bit ahead of them. So we have to, all I say to people is just approach every interaction you have with somebody with a healthy dose of skepticism, and you won't go far wrong.
As you say, if it sounds too good to be true, It nearly always is.
You've got it, sir. You've got it.
Peter,
Hi, Ash. Yeah, great talk tonight. I had something a few years ago now, and perhaps you might call it a reverse courier service. And the first intimation I had of it was a neighbour came round to see me and said, "Oh, a parcel was supposed to be delivered to you. You weren't in, so the delivery service left it with me. And then somebody knocked on my door and said, oh, that parcel that's just been delivered, it's actually got the wrong address on it. Would you mind giving it to me?" Which she did. And I said, well, there's two things wrong there. So why did you give them a parcel that was supposed to be for me? But that's by the by. So obviously I was on the lookout for this, and blow me, a couple of days later, another parcel arrives at my address. I checked the name, and my name wasn't on the label. So I said to the courier, take it away, it's not for me. It was a mobile phone, an Apple phone or something like that. Yeah. And lo and behold, somebody comes and knocks on my door asking for that parcel. And I said, no, I've given it back to the courier because it wasn't for me. So it's a different scam, but they got my address,
yeah,
but they didn't have my name. And they were basically getting high value mobile phones and picking them up. They must have been following the courier.
Yeah,
But,
or either that, or they know where your address is and they're using somebody else's financial details to order these goods. And so my wife probably order these goods, and they then will follow the courier to your address, and that's how, you know, they basically ordered something without requiring their own address to get it delivered. So very canny, as you say, and worrying as well, because obviously somebody's knocking on your door, and it takes you to the next level of concern, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, another concern I had was, in fact, I was being billed for the use of this phone. I mean, it may be used for making international calls, which can run up quite a massive bill quite quickly. Oh, yeah. So I was quite keen to let all the phone providers know, you know, it wasn't me, you know, but for
sure, yeah, good one.
But when they actually come in knocking on your door asking for a parcel, it's
yeah, I've heard of them before. That's less common, but yeah, if it's come to your door, it's always a worry.
And yes, Dick.
One of the parcel frauds, not exactly a fraud, which I have heard about, is you'll get this letter or email from the post office saying you've got to collect a parcel from them, which you don't know about, but you actually go down to the post office and pick it up. And in the meantime, they burgle your house.
Yeah, yeah, slightly different, but yeah, I wouldn't. And of course, you're not going to know, are you? But then again, you don't generally get phone calls to tell you that you've missed a parcel. So just got to be on your guard.
Yeah, Jim.
Some time ago, I got a number of calls from, would I take part in a survey? And I just said no and hung up. And I got fed up about this. Anyway, the next time they phoned, I said, yes, I will. And there was silence. That's probably the first time anybody had said, yes, I will. And then he said, right. He said, shall we begin? I said, yes, all right. How much are you paying? And there was a silence. And he said, what, are we paying you? Is that what you're asking? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, no, it's just a survey. Why do you say that? And I said, well, I'm a professional person. If you want my opinion, professional opinion, you've got to pay for it. I've never heard from them since.
I like your thinking, sir. I like your thinking.
Take one more question, Steve.
Yeah. Going back to the one that Dick said about having something put through your door to say a parcel couldn't be delivered. I didn't come across it, but I think one of my relatives did a few years ago. It tells you to ring a number. It's not a local number. If you ring the number, you get billed straight away, something like £300 a minute. Watch out if you don't know the number. If you're curious, Google the number, and it usually says it's a foreign number. it's in somewhere like one of the Eastern Bloc countries.
Yeah,
But,
and you make a very good point there, actually. If you ever get a call like that and you do capture the telephone number, put it into Google, you will generally find that it's already got reports if it's being used in some sort of criminal activity. Unfortunately, it means it's after the fact because you've got the number to hand, but it is a way of perhaps if you've had a number that contacted you when you're out, you do 1471, stick it to Google and it'll generally tell you if it is a fraudulent telephone number.
This
You
one,
had
I
this,
think,
Bob,
was
didn't
in,
you?
it was in, I got a feeling it was one of the Eastern Bloc countries, but it said,
Yeah.
you get billed £300 a minute. And the moment it connects, they hit you with 300 quid.
Absolutely, and I think BT, they really do try and
Yeah.
weed these ones out, but obviously they do sneak through.
You had this, Bob, didn't you, with a number that looked like a Taunton number?
Yeah, they're using all sorts of local numbers, so that you can't say, well, that's London. I've got nobody in London that would ring me, and you pick it up.
Yeah.
But they're all about all the time. Get them every week.
Yeah, I mean, you heard me. You saw the slide, right? That I used the term spoofing. This is the new term now, which it refers to like cloning or replicating,
Yeah.
and they can do it with telephone numbers. So if you've got a caller display on your phone, you can't take it for granted that that's the number.
No,
You've got the ability to hide behind a local number.
Yeah.
So yeah, just got to think. Imagine everything's a fraud, and you won't go far wrong.
Yeah, I do now.
Well, thank you, Ash. I think it's been a very useful and a very interesting evening's talk.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Edmund, will you please show your appreciation in the usual way?
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been my
Thank you,
pleasure.
Ash. I look forward to the booklet.
Yeah, that'll come through tomorrow. Thank you, gents. I will leave you to the rest of your meeting and leave you in good health. Take care.
Thank you.